Chapter 20. Mercy. Hive Mother Xylania 3771 cast an exasperated gaze across the holographic nursery floating in front of her. The intricately constructed image of the hypercube, which itself was constructed from a composite of thousands of tiny little cubes, mostly glowed a desolate shade of green, the color of vacancy. The giant nursery, which had a maximum capacity of no less than 1 million incubation cells, offered only a small, random smattering of violet blue distributed throughout the slowly rotating three-dimensional grid. As Xylania peered forlornly at the endless rows of empty pods hovering in front of her, she could not help but feel a strong sense of resentment. After all, there was once a time within greater Zacadian society when her rare genetic trait would have afforded her significant prestige and status. Very sadly, though, that had all changed virtually overnight when many millennia ago the Jihari Revolution had quite literally swept across the entire face of Zacadia. With the urgent new imperative to drive the global population down, the corresponding need for empathic arachnids suitable for the role of hive mother likewise diminished dramatically. As a result, the vast majority of eggs detected with this rather peculiar genetic trait had simply been disposed of, to the point that the trait itself was at genuine risk of being completely eliminated from the Zacadian gene pool. Perhaps rather fortunately, then, a small group of Jihari scientists became aware of the danger just in time to save the hive mothers from a literal extinction event. But regardless, the simple fact of the matter was that they were no longer needed in anything even close to their original numbers. As a rather depressing consequence, their days of elevated cultural status was now nothing but a tragically distant memory. The reality was that far from being a role that garnered any prestige and recognition, the hive mothers now suffered from a new age stigma, as if they themselves were personally responsible for the ensuing ecological crisis. Some particularly outspoken queens even went so far as to claim that hive mothers were literally destroying the Zacadian species with too much love. Due to the near extinction of the empathic trait, that particular rhetoric quickly dried up. But nevertheless, Xylania now lived in an age where her role in the nest was at best tolerated, and more often than not, treated with open contempt. For what seemed like the millionth time, Xylania expanded the three-dimensional image in front of her in order to explore the bottom left region of the holographic nursery. Under full magnification, the image was more than detailed enough to see the unique location ID of each individual incubation cell. After hesitating briefly, she pensively double-tapped the cell labeled X45, Y36, Z39, and the holographic image was quickly replaced with a glowing wall of text and numbers.
Classification, Jihari. Incubation status, overdue, 2 days.
Xylania double-tapped the cell's ID again, and it immediately reverted back to the previous image. She continued to repeatedly flip from one display to the other, as if doing so would somehow miraculously cause the incubation status to change.
Come on, you reticent little sackling. The whole nest is awaiting your lordship's arrival.
The hive mother muttered impatiently under her breath as she continued to flip from screen to screen.
Classification, Jihari. Incubation status, emergence pending.
Xylania's finger froze midstream, and her mandibles started to twitch with excitement.
See now, that wasn't so hard, was it?
An automated voice alert started to speak, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Cell X45, Y36, Z39, hive mother attendance is now required.
The alert was quickly followed by a mild but irritatingly incessant alarm, while the voice message continued to periodically repeat in the background. The detailed text for X45, Y36, Z39 was now locked on the visual holographic image along with an overlaid dialog box, which flashed a message in bright, bold, and impossible-to-miss text.
Hive mother biosignature required. Tap here to comply.
Zelania irritably jabbed a digit at the holographic glyph, which somewhat mercifully caused the alarm to immediately shut down. A short moment later, the voice message cut off midstream and was instantly replaced with an updated announcement.
Hive Mother Zelania 3771 acknowledged and logged. Proceed to Bay X45, Y36, Z39 and prepare for delivery.
Barely able to contain her excitement, the Hive Mother opened up a nearby storage cabinet and briskly pulled out a hatchling blanket from a large stack. She then hurriedly scuttled her way towards an automated transit cart, which obediently sprung into life as she made her approach.
Destination?
The cart asked perfunctorily.
X45, Y36, Z39. Exactly where else would I be going?
Cell X45, Y36, Z39 selected. Please confirm destination.
Oh, for Zicadia's sake, confirmed, confirmed, confirmed.
The Hive Mother replied furiously, and then from underneath her breath added,
Why can't you just do as you are told for once, you mindless rolling automata?
For both your safety and the safety of others, please engage restraining belts.
Zelania rolled her eyes wordlessly, and then peevishly clipped her 2 side legs into their harnesses, allowing her 4 posterior legs to rest comfortably within their assigned rear-facing grooves. She grasped the horizontal stabilizing bar at the front of the cart with her 2 outer forelimbs, while using her center limb to place the blanket into a small cot, and then activated the cart's local holographic display. The cart started to whine with a low electrical hum as it accelerated smoothly away from the main auditorium. Directly out in front of her, strips of lighted arrowheads blazed brightly on the floor's surface, and then quickly faded out as she passed them by. The automated cart rounded a few tight corners, running up the curved wall embankments in order to prevent itself from rolling. As the cart continued to snake its way through the empty corridors, Zelania's abdomen swayed heavily with inertia, and she silently acknowledged to herself that engaging the leg harnesses might not have been such a bad idea after all. It did not take long before she entered the giant nursery grid proper, and most of the cells lay empty and dark, which made her feel strangely on edge. This place had long since become a ghost town and was absurdly larger than it needed to be. In the glory days, it had been quite literally a hive of activity, even occasionally pushing maximum capacity. What would life have been like back then? She could not help but idly wonder to herself. Well, far more chaotic, certainly, but there would have been a powerful sense of purpose and vitality in a way that was no longer possible today. No, it was a very different story now. Strict population control was autocratically mandated and fastidiously audited. Every nest dutifully played its part, yet it was an uncomfortably persistent reminder that Zicadia was a planet whose best days had long since passed it by. Few now questioned the prevailing wisdom that if any nest wanted a truly long-term future, then it would not be on Zicadia, but out there, in the dark, endless void of space. Her stream of consciousness made her shiver, in spite of the fact that it was not at all cold, and the coarse hairs on her legs involuntarily bristled on end. The empty and featureless corridors continued to whiz silently by, echoing their mournful lament of a once vibrant past that, oh so sadly, would never come again. After traversing row upon row of empty pods, the cart pushed its way up a steeply curving gangway and into yet another very long length of corridor. The Y and Z coordinates on her holographic display now held their values statically at Y36 and Z39, while the X value continued to inexorably tick its way up. Zelania could now see the target bay directly up ahead of her, rhythmically pulsing in color from blue to white, announcing to the world a new life was about to spring forth. The cart smoothly decelerated to a full stop, just as the X coordinate locked itself in.
Arrived at Bay X45, Y36, Z39. Please disembark at your nearest convenience. Zelania 3771.
The Hive Mother hurriedly unclipped her leg restraints, and then maneuvered herself out of the cart before casting a baleful glance back at the vehicle.
Stay here.
She snapped tersely at no one in particular before returning her gaze back to the incubation pod, which shimmered like it was wrapped in a glowing translucent cocoon. Still muttering under her breath, Zelania unzipped a pouch pocket from a backpack that was firmly strapped to her dark, matte black silken thorax. She pulled out a small ID card, which she then quickly waved in front of a featureless metallic post. The field protecting the bay immediately changed color, becoming noticeably less intense. She absent-mindedly returned the card to the pouch on her back, before grabbing the hatchling blanket from the cot. After taking a small moment to steady her nerves, she apprehensively scuttled her way through the softly glowing field.
Zelania 3771, auto-sterilization protocol in progress.
Intoned the same emotionless synthetic voice that had evidently pursued her all the way from the auditorium. Well, this is it then, the hive mother thought to herself pensively. The egg itself was nearly a perfect circle and almost pure white in color. It was contained and semi-cocooned within a supporting hexagonal pod tilted upwards at about a 45-degree angle. A large glass shield protected the visible portion of the shell. While Zelania stared reverently at the perfect little egg, it suddenly began to wiggle and skitter almost as if it could sense her presence. Well, she was a hive mother after all, so who knows, maybe it actually could.
Come on, my little warrior prince, punch your way out into the light. I know you can do it.
Zelania stabbed an excited digit at a nearby holographic glyph, and the glass shield silently retracted. The egg now started to wiggle violently as a noticeable crack formed across its surface. A piece of the shell suddenly broke away, and a coarsely haired and damply glistening limb pushed its way through victoriously. She could now see 9 tiny little digits grasping at thin air and immediately realized that this was one of his forelimbs. Face first and fearlessly into the unknown, the hive mother thought to herself with an almost overwhelming sense of reverence. And I'd expect nothing less of my brave little Shihari lord. The spiderlings' tiny little digits wrapped themselves around the broken edges of the thick shell, and with a startling amount of force, ripped a large chunk of it away. A short moment later, a curious little face popped out of the small hole, with a cluster of glittering red eyes peering outwards into the bay. The baby arachnid quickly settled its gaze upon the hive mother, who was holding the blanket out in front of her expectantly.
Welcome to the light X45, Y36, Z39. My name is Zelania, as in Zelan-E-R. I am your designated hive mother, and it is my greatest honor to receive his little lordship into the open arms of Nest Zetalia.
The baby Shihari spiderling just stared back at her suspiciously. The expression on his face strongly suggested that he was attempting to carefully weigh her up as either friend or foe. After a very short but tense standoff, he apparently made up his mind and ferociously leapt into the waiting blanket as Zelania quickly wrapped it around his damp little body. Unable to contain her excitement any longer, the hive mother let out a small shriek of joy. Now cradling the baby spider in one arm, she broke off a piece of shell from the empty egg sac, before scuttling her way back towards the transit cart. She gently placed the hatchling into the cot beside her, and then quickly secured her legs back into their harnesses.
Zelania.
A small voice called out from somewhere deep within the cot. The hive mother just beamed back brightly, her mandibles stretching wide.
Yes, that's absolutely perfect. My name is Zelania, and yours, my little Shihari lordship, will very soon be revealed. Well, they said you would be a fast learner, but I didn't think you would be quite that fast. Bless you, little child. Bless this nest, and bless this truly wonderful day.
Zelania now offered the broken piece of shell to the baby spiderling, who in response just continued to eye it suspiciously. Undeterred, and in an attempt to ease its apparent concern, the hive mother proceeded to mimic an exaggerated eating motion.
Yummy. Good for you.
She continued to mimic patiently. The baby spider seemed to ponder this for a brief moment, before greedily snatching the piece of shell from the hive mother's hand. Zelania quickly flicked the holographic display back on and issued some terse instructions to the cart, which, after receiving confirmation, obediently made its way back to the auditorium. Still filled with the joy of the moment, she now scarcely even noticed the deserted halls silently whizzing by, their ancient stories of joy and sorrow long lost to the shadows of time. Upon her return to the main auditorium, Zelania gently scooped the baby spiderling out of the cot and then briskly made her way towards the nearby bioinduction lab. As she made her approach, the lab's large circular doors irised wide, and the hive mother excitedly made her way in, with the baby spiderling cradled protectively under a forelimb. A Shimatiri technician, who was awkwardly positioned under a bulky and partially disassembled analysis pod, cast a distracted glance in her general direction.
Well, what have we got here then?
The technician muttered under his breath, with a mildly patronizing tone that Zelania did not much appreciate.
Could this actually be the new Shihari replacement unit we've all been anxiously waiting for? Or is it just another, run-of-the-mill Shimatiri underling ready to do its bit for the glory of Nest Zetalia?
Zelania rolled her eyes with despair. She could not help but wonder when this type of undisguised cynicism had become the new social norm. However, ever the pragmatist, she decided to simply treat his largely rhetorical question as a timely opportunity to express her caustic disapproval.
Pay no attention to this indolent reprobate, my young Shihari lord. After all, when you achieve the title of general, which I have every confidence that you will, he will no doubt be one of the first to fall to his knees in a blind rush to pledge his groveling fealty.
In spite of her savage retort, Zelania noted with some considerable amount of rancor that the technician had returned to his work and was no longer paying her even the remotest attention. As she glared resentfully down at the Shimatiri drone's flattened-out limbs, one of his hands reached out searchingly from underneath the console, feeling its way around blindly for a nearby tool. Seizing the opportunity, she caught the edge of the device with one of her feet and deftly nudged it just beyond his reach. The Shimatiri technician, apparently now fully absorbed in his work, continued to mutter quietly under his breath.
Well, I never. An old-school hive mother bearing an actual newborn Shihari. Whoever would have guessed it? Now where is that damn fusing iron?
After feeling around the floor unsuccessfully for a few moments longer, the technician pulled himself out from underneath the console just long enough to grab the tool, before quickly disappearing back under again. Zelania sighed heavily, before making her way frostily to one of the medical pods at the far end of the lab, putting as much distance between herself and the technician as physically possible. She tapped irritably at the pod's control panel, and its glass shield obediently slid wide, allowing her to place the Shihari hatchling gently within its interior. As she attempted to remove the blanket from the spiderling's body, he clung to it fiercely and refused to let go.
Now, try to be brave, my little lord. You can have it back as soon as we are done, I promise.
The expertly soothing tone of her words seemed to somewhat reassure him, and he reluctantly released his grip on the blanket. Zelania quickly retapped the control panel, and the shielding swiftly slid back into place. The spiderling immediately pressed his hands against the glass, as if to gain a spatial sense of his confinement. The hive mother, who had begun to make some soft cooing sounds, activated the pod's holographic display and somewhat apprehensively selected the postnatal bioscan. Zelania's intuition told her this hatchling was something very special, and while speech always came quickly to the multi-brained, split minds of the Shihari, to have spoken her name just moments after hatching, well, that was nothing short of astounding. Greater than 3 brains she already had little doubt. But maybe this future Shihari general might even go beyond 5. Just imagine it, another 7-brained Shihari lord, someone to finally keep that brilliant but unorthodox Shihari scientist on his toes. She felt quite certain that after the untimely death of Zimodian 110, this baby spiderling could well prove to be the successor Queen Zetalia had been so desperately trying for. But in any event, The bioscans would quickly confirm if her instincts were right or not. The medical unit now started to glow brightly, and a fine crosshatch of red photonic beams, forming a flat vertical grid, slowly but inexorably made its way across the internal volume of the pod. The baby spiderling immediately scrambled to the opposite end of the enclosure, his array of red eyes growing wide with fright as the small black pupils darted their way around wildly, half searching, half pleading for any possible way out.
No, Zelania.
A frightened little voice cried out desperately, muted and muffled as it was by the pod's feeble internal amplifier.
Hey now, just try your best to stay calm. This is all for your own good, I promise.
The hive mother heard a small condescending snicker echo forth from the far end of the lab.
So this is our next great military leader, huh? I feel a lot safer already.
Zelania tried her level best to ignore the technician and just kept her eyes firmly fixed on the little spiderling, who, try as he might, could not scale up onto the smooth glass panel in an apparent last-ditch attempt to escape his fate. With nowhere left to run, the photonic grid began to robotically cycle back and forth across his body and legs. He bravely endured the scan for a few brief moments before launching himself back to the other side of the pod, with the grid relentlessly pursuing close behind. Quickly recognizing the futility of trying to run away, the spiderling became stoically frozen to the spot. The photonic waves then mindlessly proceeded to do their job as the grid increased in frequency from red through to blue, while it methodically worked its way repeatedly across his still damp little body. He did nothing further to resist, but Zelania couldn't help but notice that all his eyes were tightly shut and his legs had begun to shake violently. After what seemed like a small eternity, the photonic grid suddenly faded out, and slowly, one by one, the baby spiderling's eyes popped back open. He stared at the hive mother accusingly, and Zelania wondered somewhat miserably whether he would ever fully trust her again. The holographic display started to spit out a detailed report, which she quickly began to scan, in order to see if this really was the new Zimodian that she very much hoped he would turn out to be. There was, however, one particular area highlighted in bright flashing red text that all but demanded her immediate attention. For the briefest moment, her mind refused to acknowledge what she was reading, but after redigesting the text several times, the warning message slowly started to penetrate her profound sense of disbelief. "It's simply not possible," she whispered silently to herself before casting a furtive glance back towards the technician at the other end of the lab. Not possible, but there it was anyway. Something so wondrous and terrible that not even her greatest of dreams nor worst of nightmares could ever have thought to conceive of it. She stealthily engaged the holographic editor and then made a very minor alteration to the data in front of her. A small glowing number immediately changed from red to green, but still brightly outshone everything else around it. Breathing a silent sigh of relief, she surreptitiously hit the save button and was instantly asked to confirm the update. Wincing visibly at the audible request, she hurriedly jabbed a digit at the confirmation glyph. With the alteration now successfully made, the hive mother turned a disbelieving gaze upon the baby spiderling, as if just now seeing him for the very first time. No wonder his aura glows so brightly, she thought to herself wondrously. The identifier, X45, Y36, Z39, which hovered innocently in the air, now innocuously transformed into that of a name. The hive mother whispered it reverently, as if to savor the taste of it on her mandibles. Zimodian, 111. A very special name, for a very special arachnid. I promise you this, my future Shihari General, your secret will always be safe with me. Zelania eagerly pressed a digit to the control panel, and the glass shield smoothly retracted. Zimodian instantly leapt back into the open blanket, and the hive mother instinctively held the baby spider close to her hearts.
There, my brave little Shihari General. Everything will be just fine, I promise.
But even as she spoke the words, she knew this was a promise that wasn't hers to make. After casting a reproachful glance at the holographic display, Zelania very surreptitiously selected Submit. She felt almost as if she had just gotten away with the perfect crime. But as she tried to discreetly exit the lab, the technician yelled out loudly in protest.
Not quite so fast, Hive Mother. Did you seriously think that I had somehow failed to notice? Hive Mother or not, I'm not afraid of you. No, don't fuck with my tools ever again. Not if you know what's good for you anyway. By the way, exactly how many brains did we score this time around?
Zelania suppressed a profound sense of relief.
9 more than you.
She replied vitriolically before hurriedly exiting the lab.